Welcome everyone to our presentation, which looks at the built environment and how it can lead sustainable development. We will look at this through communities of practice, through stewardship, and through service to society. My name is Dr. Jonescu, and I'll be presenting today, and I do this on behalf of a number of my colleagues who contributed to the paper. Mr. Kwa Do, an Associate Professor at Curtin University and an adjunct at Haim-Sharley, Mr. Kalen Howard, Managing Director of Haim-Sharley, Mr. William Hames, who's the Chairman and Co-Founder of Haim-Sharley, as well as Mr. Brooke McGowan, who's the Perth Studio Leader. We may be aware that in 2019, the United Nations made a call to action on sustainable development. We may also be aware that it was in direct response to the imminent timeline to prevent irreversible damage from climate change. Many vulnerable communities already experience food security and ecosystem crisis and have done so for some time. Based on projected global temperature estimates and resultant environmental damage, a permanent population displacement of 200 million people will result by 2050, it is estimated. The company has created two critical roles and is continuing in its commitment and industry-led investment in the innovation and excellence, engaging widely for the creation of joint platforms for the company to create a nexus and partnerships between industry-led practice and research and the academic world. And it's to advance transferable and specialised skills and knowledge across the academic, research and practice divide. This presentation outlines a number of key strategies that Haim-Sharley has been involved with in commitment to helping to address this systemic change that the UN has required to change the construction industry in direct response to some of these calls for action. The approaches that we talk about seeks transferability between the industry, universities and statutory authorities. And I'll discuss these through alignment with one, our future research at Haim-Sharley, our internal systems and processes, and through industry-led case studies, which look at educational frameworks and discourse with academia. This approach hopes to elicit globally scalable and impactful strategies through educational design. Looking at wicked problems, the literature largely concludes that human advancement and progress, our activities, are at the expense of the planet. Many vulnerable communities have experienced devastating effects arising from the effects of rising sea level. The Maldives, for example, is under a state of alert by order of government and has explored several remedies, including retreating, adapting, and barricading, and fortifying entire coastlines. There are many other examples, such as Boston, Venice, Amsterdam, District 4 in Vietnam, South Florida, USA, and many other examples. In all of these examples, they have responded in their own unique way to these wicked problems. Globally, building and construction activities accounts for 39% of the world's global emissions and is one of the worst carbon polluters of all industries. Australia, which has only a population of 25.4 million and is considered to only make a small contribution to the world's population, contributes disproportionately to the global footprint. The challenge here is that in Australia, the construction industry employs up to 9% of the population. So it provides opportunities for significant wealth creation in the country. What it also provides, however, is a significant opportunity to make a big impact and contribution through just one sector. There are considerations for designers also. Some key factors include the consideration of buildings through the circular economy, through the reduction of operational carbon in existing buildings through energy efficiency, use of renewable energy to cover the remaining low energy use, and to consider on-site and off-site reduction opportunities and reduction of embodied carbon of new buildings over the entire life cycle. Designers should also consider the design for disassembly and second life applications, which actually requires that they consider the second life use through the design of the first life or first phase of its life. So there is a higher level of consideration expected. The company, or Haim-Charlie, has an industry-led applied research priority agenda, which is positioned around sustainability in the context of globalization, urbanization, and decarbonisation. And we've adopted strategies and developed tools for use within the company to look at how this model can be implemented. The practice's ethos is to enable communities to flourish and is considered through the design and engagement with local communities that we serve. We look to embrace diversity and inclusivity and supporting long-term economic growth without negatively impacting the social and environmental, cultural aspects of the community. From a financial perspective though, we look to improve value for money, which is considered, and also it's considered in conjunction with the embodied energy profile of the project. As a pilot study, I'll quickly cover off the shift from the Subiaco office to the CBD. This project represents reduced operational carbon through the occupation of an existing upper level CBD building through adaptive reuse. We extend the intended life cycle value of the existing building through repurposing it. Now note that the studio is currently in the process of looking at certification for carbon neutrality. The projects like this that are subject to the feasibility constraints of the municipal guidelines and regulations have implications which can be significant, and they're significant from the perspective of permitted land use. Beyond this, specific design requirements further impacted the feasibility of this project, but these conditions were able to be met through and mitigated through design. But in doing so, this did risk increased capital costs. The design prioritized operational carbon impact. Passive design principles and materials were also considered critical, and this was to minimize operational carbon output across the building's life cycle. It included an upper floor facade canopy that we reorientated to face due north-south, with an operable western facade veil and shading of the glazing. We looked at exposed thermal mass, LED lighting. They're all fitted with sensors, and they are all individually stationed with occupancy sensors as well that can be expanded and contracted as required. We also have end-of-trip provisions which enable and encourage active transportation. So we undertook a survey to this end, and we did a survey that accounted for travel habits between Subiaco, which is our previous studio, approximately 7 to 8 kilometres away from the CBD. We did this as a two-phase purposive survey. We anticipated that there's going to be a shift to the CBD in the way of a dependence on public transport. And this was shared across all of the employees in the studio. The move to the CBD was one of the more ambitious decarbonisation strategies that Haim-Charlie had achieved. And through this, we looked at other social benefits of democratisation of public transportation to and access to parking. The shift between the two studios was during a transition period where we were not under lockdown, and it happened between July and August this year. Interestingly, the findings suggested that there's a much huger uptake in public transportation dependence, almost 100%. Virtually nobody drives in for daily transport to and from work, although one or two may drive from time to time if they have meetings that are far away and are not accessible by public transport. The few people that did drive, they drove to a location at which they could park to then complete their journey via public transport. So there was a significant uptake in public transport usage. Car dependence, therefore, decreased by nearly 100% on a day-to-day basis. And we also conducted an active commute pilot study within this study using a step count, just as an indicative to see if there has been a significant shift, because most of the meetings that happen in the CBD are able to be accessed by foot traffic. And this indicated that there was quite a spike. So this lends itself to future research for us. Haimshali's internal systems and processes and an all studios environmental plan has been implemented to ensure that as a practice we minimise our carbon footprint as much as possible. In addition, the policy focuses on sound internal practices, for example with the use of water, electricity consumption, recycling of all of our materials, the use of chemicals, and we certainly promote public transport and active transportation wherever possible. The company contributes to the ASBN, or the Adelaide Sustainable Building Network, which seeks to achieve best practice across all built environment disciplines and industries. We also are signatory to the Architects Declare, an international network of practices committed to climate and biodiversity. And Haimshali approaches provision of service to its clients through three levels of sustainable consideration. We look at best practice, which occurs on every project. We look towards leading practice, which is a combination of best practice plus additional requirements by the client. And we increasingly strive for regenerative design practice. And as much as we can, we try to educate our clients in the importance of moving forward on sustainable initiatives as a collective. Decarbonisation through influence and advocacy and promoting best practice service is furthered through our engagements with partnerships with universities, through education and mentorship. And this is really critical to get in early and influence the next generation of practitioners that will come through our doors. And I'll discuss an example of this through the following case study. So the Treasuring Rotto project, Rotto being Rottnest, offered an immersive real-world industry and academic knowledge share, project-based engagement through what was named the Nexus 1.5 program. It involves real-world based research by design with direct co-evaluation with industry, government and university. Now, to explain the Nexus 1.5, this is a concept, a lens through which to teach an established pedagogical framework through studios in the final Bachelor of Architecture Design research studio. And this was an extension of other studies that had already been done using the Nexus 1.5 concept, which was in 2018. We did a multi-phase artisan centre, and in 2019 a multi-phase waste transfer facility for the City of Stirling, both of these a very large municipality within Perth. It provides a project-based learning environment which reflected the real world, but was co-delivered and professionally accredited. It was delivered through a professionally accredited studio program across 3 units in architecture, and also one in construction management in the School of Design and the Built Environment, Curtin University. The projects were co-developed in collaboration with the Rottnest Island Authority, which was the client. Now, Rottnest Island is about 19 kilometres off the coast of Western Australia, and it's administered by the Rottnest Island Authority, and it serves currently, it has a long Indigenous history, but it serves currently as a premier tourist destination for both people in Western Australia, but also internationally. Now, there's been significant growth in tourist visitation, which required an increase in investment across a number of different sites. So the project-based study involved the architecture students developing design propositions to meet the requirements of the Rottnest Island Authority across a number of sites all around the island that had all different conditions, and these were done through mentorship and established firms. And these firms were of various scales, all played an essential role in providing and contributing to high-level industry smarts. Other collaborating partners included architects and construction professionals, and partnerships were deemed crucial to increase the likelihood for long-term industry understanding, collegiate collaborations, and to engender an industry-wide commitment towards best practice for students, clients, consultants, and government. Now, this unified a common purpose which aimed at exploring new modes of working together to solve complex real-world problems in sustainable ways, and exploring alternative design approaches that generate advancement in knowledge and knowledge share. So what we did, students formed into simulated design firms of approximately 10 students, and this allowed for early discourse and to challenge robustly the thinking through early interactions with industry and government through the project collaborations that we had set up. And the setup was through a joint venture contractual setting. This allowed for cross-disciplinary vertical and longitudinal integration of knowledge share and project-based skills exchange. This involved things like seminars, workshops, roundtables, and a consultative process that encouraged critical thinking and debate. It also supported, it was done in a supportive pedagogical environment, as I mentioned, in the studio. This cross-pollinated innovative solutions and strategies that jumped between the academic and industry-led divide. Constructability, costing, and life cycle assessments were also produced by construction management students, which were also mentored by staff and industry. And this also developed a stronger interdisciplinary relationship between architecture students and construction management. Students were mentored and guided through the various stages of development processes and proposals as part of a simulated design tender with sustainable development thinking as a key critical lens throughout each of the stages. Now, given the natural context and sustainable development required for such a place like Rottnest Island, embodied energy and life cycle performance were some of the key criteria. Key considerations included design for the circular economy, end-of-life deconstruction and reuse, design for disassembly and second life applications, and these were specifically targeted in considering the marking for students. Methodologies robustly tested ideas, concepts and strategies considered appropriate to design inquiry. It included communities of practice, rapid prototyping, iterative sketching and diagramming, as well as stakeholder engagement and communication. The JV teams developed into inclusive co-design process and cross-disciplinary knowledge share ecologies that positively impacted student experience. The design propositions initiated high-level conversation relating to the importance of sustainable approaches, both in an educational and industry setting, but are scalable well beyond the immediate classroom. From our perspective, positive contributions with students, academics, consultants and research through design practice is critical to initiating and motivating this systemic change that's required of us. Thank you for listening to the presentation, and we look forward to any queries that may come via email. Thank you.